Hello, friends, and welcome to Your Daily Detroit. It is Wednesday, May 28th, 2025. I am Jer Stays, coming to you from our table at the Mackinac Policy Conference. And joining me, somebody I am honored to have at the table to you're a guest, but in a way kind of co-host today's episode, a guest co-host, if you will. Annalise Frank, reporter for Axios Detroit. I have been following your work for years. You're one of the people I enjoy the most to read in town. So I feel very honored and special that you've joined us at this table. I know our listeners love you too.
Thank you so much. That means a lot coming from you. I really appreciate it. And I'm really happy to be here and excited. And hope I say some not too dumb things.
Well, you know what? Here at Daily Detroit, it's all right to say dumb things. At least as long as you're entertaining.
Yes. Gotta have a little entertainment.
Right. You can't be boring, right? All right. So we're going to talk about a couple of things. We will talk about the mayor's race and your ongoing coverage. You've been doing a great job as an ongoing thread. But I want to start on something extremely timely, because this morning we heard word about Sister Pie and a change in their operations. And if you don't know, Sister Pie's been around for, I think, a decade in the Indian Village, West Village neighborhood area of Detroit. Cookbook, national plaudits, lots of attention, and pausing operations coming as of June 9th. And it's really gotten people in their feelings. You know, they're going to decide what they're going to do next. They're going to do pop-ups, whatever. As I said, pausing operations, not closing. It's got a lot of people in their feels about if they're having issues, you know, who else is having issues? And then, is this micro or macro? You know, because I talk to a lot of business owners who tell me things are not the same since the pandemic. You know, you wrote up something. What are some of your thoughts? And if I missed any important facts, because, you know, you're the real journalist.
That's not true. So, I used to cover small businesses a lot. I don't really anymore quite as much, but I still have a lot to say. Sister Pie, this business, opened in 2015 and, expanded more, over the next couple of years with classes. Maybe some listeners have taken some pie dough classes or something like that. They do quite a bit. And she has made some, widely reported efforts to expand over the years that, haven't panned out for whatever reason. And, if you've been to her space, it's pretty little, and they have a very, dedicated following and, on certain days, really long lines. And as you said, she had a cookbook that was New York Times, top baking cookbook of the year or something like that, in the top. And this is a business that's really well known. I have family members who will drive an hour to go to this place, and
I call it a neighborhood business, but a regional destination.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think the other notable thing is I think that some people definitely see it as an anchor of West Village, or a place that has drawn businesses there, people there, like a magnet or something there. We don't really know what is behind the financial challenges that Sister Pie is experiencing. I haven't, spoken with them or anything like that, but if they're not doing well, it feels like a bad sign for small businesses here. I mean, who can succeed,
Yeah. I actually talked to her with an interview that is now kind of out of date, but it was just a few days ago, around small business and things like that. And the idea was, she's been around for 10 years. What has she learned? That kind of stuff. And I really got away from the conversation that, you know what? People need to show up. People really need to show up and buy more. That since the pandemic, things have not been the same. And that this is something that I can say as a reporter, I have seen a number of businesses tell me. I remember talking to Dennis Archer Jr. about Central Kitchen, even in downtown Detroit. Still not the same business from the pandemic. I did that interview for PBS Detroit. I've heard this over and over again, and it really makes me concerned as somebody who loves community spaces. I know that so much stuff is going online. I know that so much is about, consumer packaged goods and putting it on the shelf at Meijer or something. But there is something about those spaces and being with each other that I think is so important. Part of the reason I do all this stuff at Daily Detroit, connect people to all these interesting things where it's you're bringing your dog, you're with your friends, you're making memories that you just can't make when you hit the click to buy button.
Yeah. Experiencing local businesses and getting to know the people there, heaven forbid, walking down the street to your local business,
heaven forfend.
It's businesses like this are very important to us. And like you're saying, even downtown businesses are struggling. Obviously small businesses have a high closure rate, right?
Yeah.
New small businesses, but I feel it just seems like a lot, take the Rattlesnake Club, which closed a couple of years, and that's a 30-year-old business that just could not recover from the pandemic. And like if their event space can't, then like what event space can? And and like I said, I don't cover these businesses like I used to, but I would imagine it's quite concerning.
Yeah, yeah. Before we get into this mayor's conversation, what is it that really drives you to cover Detroit like you do? Because you're somebody who I find you get on the ground, we will run into each other at events and it'll be like, hey, how you doing? And you're always faster than I am and getting stuff
out. I
don't
know about that. Well, I guess with the daily newsletter, you kind of have to be.
But what really, draws you to cover Detroit, as a concept?
I got my job at Crane's Detroit business where I used to work, in 2017. And, I'm from the region. I'm from Macomb County. I went to school at Romeo High School. So I like to be really transparent about that. It's not like I'm from Detroit. I had this experience from Macomb County of Detroit growing up. But, I think it's just, I've lived in the city since March 2020, which was, not a fun time to move. But it's so, I've lived here 5 years and, covered it before that as well. And I just think there's so much to say. And like, I think what really drove me when I started covering Mayor Duggan and, the administration of the city of Detroit is like, the financial changes in the city, financial recovery, whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's not enough reporters looking into those kinds of issues. And it's not enough not the reporters not doing a good enough job. There's just not enough reporters, right? Like there's amazing reporters in Detroit. There's just not enough.
I mean, there was a time I remember there would be the equivalency of tablefuls of reporters covering those kind of local civic issues.
Yeah.
I first started my career at Channel 4 News in 1998.
Ooh, yeah, there you go.
And so I've seen a lot of change.
I bet.
Where it's like you...
That's true. There's no floors anymore. Yeah.
We're just in space.
Yeah.
It's all. It's all.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like it. Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that's really like where I tried to find my niche, and that's changed, because now I sort of have to be more of a generalist at Axios, but like out of, love for a place and love for the people around you. And like you need people watching that stuff, and I'm not saying like I'm doing the best job at anything like that, but it's just kind of like part of what drove my interest in like, I just want to do good journalism that shines a light on those things sometimes, hopefully.
Well, tomorrow there is a debate here.
There is.
At the Mackinac Policy Conference.
Yeah.
Mayoral debate where a selection of candidates, it's not all of them, it's the top number that they picked. I think you would know better than I do off the top of your head.
My understanding is that they looked at the candidates and made this determination as to who they wanted to include. And I think it included some different factors like polling and, what they've said and that sort of thing. They picked these 5 people, so Santia Jenkins, who, the former Thaw CEO and city council member, Mary Sheffield, as listeners I'm sure know, Mary Sheffield, of course.
City council president. Yep. Fred Durhall.
Yep. We got City Council member Fred Durhall, former state legislator, Pastor Solomon Kinlock, and James Craig, who's the former police chief.
Yeah.
So we got these 5 people, and I think it's notable because it's a debate. And all the other events we've seen have been forums, quote unquote, which is not a debate technically. So
right. It doesn't have as much. Forums don't have as much one-to-one interaction.
Right.
Whereas a debate, it's like you get to see them. And I think that's something that's going to be important because there needs to be, I think, more energy around this one, right? I want to see these candidates, as somebody who covers this myself and as a resident of the city as well, I want to see the candidates like show why they want to do this, right?
Yeah.
And really, I think they have an opportunity here to stand out because, time's a ticking on the election clock.
Yeah, it really is. I think late June, absentee ballots go out. So this is really like crunch time. And there's an opportunity to differentiate yourselves with people who, frankly have a lot of money that could support you, at this conference. And I think it'll be interesting to see how candidates sort of thread the line of like, I'm talking to a certain community here. And, these people, some of them, actually can't vote in Detroit, but they have a lot of business in Detroit, and some of them do live in Detroit, obviously, but I don't know the percentage. But They have a lot of money they might donate. But you also want to stay true to your message, right? And, what is your message? And, how do you feel about development? How do you feel about tax incentives? How do you feel about job creation? How are you going to work with businesses who want to create jobs in the city but have other expectations? How are you going to talk about the community benefits ordinance, which is pretty divisive among developers and, some of the larger corporate folks? So it'll be really interesting to see how candidates differentiate themselves from each other. Like you said, they're going to be talking to each other. I think, rebuttals, right?
Yeah. Well, and the community benefits ordinance, I know, is something that you have a particular interest in covering, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I've covered it for a while, not since it was originally voted in. That was 2016, which I, was not living here at the time. But
I was about to say, if you were not living.
I was actually born in 2017. I've aged very quickly.
It's a Benjamin Button situation.
Yeah, it's just, covering the different projects that have gone through the community benefits ordinance, which, mandates, I feel like readers are probably familiar, but, mandates some interaction between certain appointed members of the community and developers to, bring some things to the community in exchange for potentially impacting it with their development. We've seen Michigan
Especially
Central.
Especially if there is dollars coming, public dollars or incentives in some way, because it's not just about like direct cash from the city, but a lot of times it's about incentives or delayed tax payments, or you get a lower tax rate for a period of years. And oftentimes the community has a lot of input with that, and it's in a localized area. I know that there's split opinions on this, because some people are really for them, and then other people go, well, at least this has been some of the conversations I've had, and feel free to push back, but if you're going to do a community benefits ordinance, that's going to increase the cost of the project, right? Because everything costs something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No matter what, if you're going to go ahead and build a park or whatever, that costs money. So that ends up affecting the price of the project. There's been a lot of tension with that.
Yeah. And, there's this idea of do they just build that cost into the cost of their project? And then is that, just part of doing business and not like a real effort, to blend with community or what? That's something I hear too. And I think there's a lot of the candidates have talked about revisiting the community benefits ordinance and, redoing it in some way. Potentially, obviously, that would involve city council, that have to be voted on by city council. And I don't know to what extent they would revisit it, but it's certainly a theme. And so they're going to have to differentiate themselves on that. And something I asked every candidate when I sat down with them for our mayoral sit-down series.
Very official.
Yes. I asked everyone, how do you balance the interests of businesses and of community members? These interests aren't always opposed, but a lot of times they are in the instance of these community benefits meetings. You hear these opposing opinions. How do you balance that and be true to the different, stakeholders, large and small, figuratively, that you need to pay attention to? Everybody basically, they had their different answers, and a lot of them feel that they want to work with corporations, but they want them to be responsible and prove that they truly want to help Detroiters and increase wages and do the kinds of things that need to be done for Detroit to grow its middle class, that sort of thing. So I don't know how that's going to pan out, but
it'll be interesting to see how that plays out on the debate stage, because I hear a lot of energy around making it easier for small businesses to locate in the city of Detroit.
Oh yeah, that too.
Whether it's lowering overall tax rates just across the board, instead of saying, okay, well, we're going to do incentives, saying, okay, how do we find ways to either lower the general taxes or lower property taxes and things like that to make it easier to locate in the city, move to the city, buy in the city. And what is that tension between lowering the actual rates and saying doing incentive packages? And also, a lot of the city is also competing with a lot of the suburbs for different stuff. So I interviewed somebody who opened up a spot in Dearborn, and they decided to go to Dearborn because when they showed up to Dearborn, the Dearborn apparatus, Mayor Abdullah Mahmood, it's like, okay, here's your packet and here's your person, right? Here, if you want to open up a restaurant, here's
streamlined,
who you go to, right? And it's like a streamlined process. Whereas here, I've heard from a lot of people in the city of Detroit, there's a lot more inspections and red tape and what do you have to do and uncertainty and timing delays. And with these small businesses, time is money. So if you delay something a month because you can't get an inspection, it almost favors the giant projects more, because the giant projects have the lawyers and the space to navigate these things. Whereas if you're a small business, you're just trying to get your shrimp shack going or whatever. You only got so much time. You only got so much money. You got to get out there and start making money.
Yeah. Do you have the connections to understand the process and move through it? And, if you don't, that doesn't mean you're a worse business owner, right?
And should you need to have those connections to operate?
Yeah, right. Yeah, what a question. And I think a lot of these candidates are talking about cutting red tape, quote unquote, and streamlining these processes. I just spoke with Councilmember Fred Durhal this morning, and he was talking about that. And it's something that a lot of them want to do. It's just, I think, a matter of, how are you going to do that? Are you going to, how do you shift the funding? What do you take the funding away from to shift it there? And how do you fix that process? Because that's been discussed for so many years. It's been a big ticket item for a lot of council members in the past. And I mean, it sounds like it's not fixed. So we'll have to see kind of what new energy can be brought to that,
Yeah. Are you looking to see some shifts in the race? Are you looking to see if there's going to be people who start to, make moves in the polls and in name ID from this debate, or some of the ones that are up ahead? Because, I mean, that's a real challenge. It's not just like, are you for or against someone? But a lot of these candidates in recent polling we've seen, they kind of struggle a little bit with name ID, name recognition.
It's hard because you acknowledge these polls and you acknowledge there's front runners, but you also acknowledge that a lot can change, and, if you have a big backer or a breakthrough or some news or, what have you, your destiny or your fate can change. And so I think there's a lot of room for that. And if I was a betting person, I don't know who I don't know. There's some idea of
it's not our job to figure out
exactly
the betting lines on this.
Yeah.
But I do know that if you can find some backers or some people who are really interested in getting into this race. I live in the city. You live in the city. Mm-hmm. This place is not covered in billboards. This place is not covered. It's not. I feel like outside of lawn signs, it doesn't really feel like election season like I would know it, right? And somebody with some dollars who comes in, it's like, all right, let's light up Woodward and Michigan and Jefferson and Gratiot and just make this place, get that instant name ID, because that matters so much in these races.
Yeah, it really does. And people are trying to door knock and spread that message. And like I just drove past on Anthony Wayne Drive, and I think it was Anthony Wayne Drive, and Solomon Kinloch had the, this kind of huge event with like a scrim with his name all across it. And, I'm sure that kind of thing helps with name recognition. Also, you talk to people, I think there's a lot of people who are still really undecided, and like what's going to clinch that decision for them? Like, how are we going to differentiate, and it's not just about policy, right? It's a lot about like their leadership style. Like, what do they bring? Who can they connect? What kind of, like, for lack of a better term, like vibe are they going to bring in terms of their, how they can move the city forward?
Right. And you speak of vibe, and listen, whether you agree with him or not, Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan has a lot of vibe. Like there's a lot of energy there, right? Like the guy, you don't miss him in a room. You don't, like, there's a big energy field or force to fill with that. And And I wonder if voters are looking for someone to do that, or if they understand, like, some politicians just have their own thing, right? Not every politician is going to be as like big energy. And I mean, look, Duggan, whether or not he wins, he's literally mounting an independent campaign for governor. That takes a certain amount of boldness, to say the least, right?
Yes.
Like, that's the unconventional
yes.
path.
Yes.
Right? And so he brought that to the races, the mayoral races. And I think, at least from listening to some of our listeners, some people are looking for that, like, oh, hey, who's going to be that big city mayor, right? Because this isn't Troy, right?
Yeah.
Like, this isn't, this isn't Farmington Hills. This is the biggest city in Michigan. Who's going to be that big personality, and who's going to start to show that big personality?
Right. Is anyone holding back? And could they potentially, reveal that? I mean, I think you can look to a couple, obviously, Pastor Solomon Kinloch, he is used to, having a stage and commanding it and speaking in a way that people can relate to, right? And like, if you watch the forums, I've seen him in one forum, and you can tell, like, it's a place where he can, empathize and kind of command that audience, and then also, of course, Council President Sheffield, she's used to speaking before, the public at weekly and sort of, and making a stand on issues and, announcing her people's bills and things like that. So I think it's just up to people what they resonate and take away with, and I, watching these forums, everybody has different issues that they, command applause on, what forum I was at, Todd Perkin was getting a lot of interest with the way he was framing things in a relatable way. And so I think I want to see the same thing you want to see, like, who do people connect with in a deeper way?
Yeah. Well, this forum is tomorrow night, correct?
Yeah,
we will both be there. You will be writing up things right away.
Yes, for the newsletter the next morning. Yes. Yeah, it should be really interesting. I hope we hear some good specifics, some good back and forth, some Yeah, I can't wait for it.
Yeah, and I believe it'll be live streamed.
Yes,
So
that's
if
my
people do want to
understanding.
people do want to tune in. But if they want to go ahead and get your reports, where can they sign up?
Axios.com/local/Detroit. You can sign up for the email Axios newsletter. It is free, it is daily, and it takes like 5 minutes to read each morning. So I think it's pretty good, low time commitment.
Awesome. Well, Annalise Frank, thank you so much for coming by. I really appreciate you, and come back around sometime.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.